I went from ladder 15 to rescue 1, made my way back to ladder 15 eventually. And then as an officer, I bounced around a little bit. It's like there are some people in my job and probably yours that will go to one company and that's where they want to be their whole career. I have a tendency, especially the second half of my career, where I can't sit still. I need to be put in different, I need that uncomfortable, like kind of what I talked about in the article. It's like, I don't know if I think it's a personal thing for me. Like I just need that constant like change.
Thoughts and opinions by JobTlks podcast members and guests are not representative of any department, organization, or city. This episode of JobTlks podcast is brought to you by Fortified Leather. Fortified Leather is a firefighter-owned and family-run business by Nathan Welch. Nathan spent some time with Cal Fire and is now on the job in Selma, California. We've built a great relationship with Nathan and his business, and we're thrilled to have him back to sponsor another season. Fortified Leather produces high-quality, handmade leather products that are designed with firefighters in mind. From radio straps and flashlight holsters to axe belts and a whole lot more, Nathan puts out an amazing product. I can tell you I've had some Fortified Leather gear on my turnout for a while now, and I've gotten to put it to use. I absolutely stand behind the products Fortified Leather makes. So if you're in the market for some gear or want to know more, head over to fortifiedleather.com. You can also find them on social media as Fortified Leather, or you can check out our episode number 53 where we brought him in to talk Cali firefighting and leatherwork. So go give him a follow and a like, check out his shop, and let's keep supporting firefighter and family-owned businesses. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Will with JobTlks Podcast. We have Kenny Hayes, Captain from Boston Fire Department, with us today. Captain, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you wrote an article several months ago at this point about the Probie mindset. I read it. Happened to work with another guy at the Fire Academy that you know pretty well, and he put us in contact. So it was Justin Yanisik. I really appreciate that, because we're going to talk about the article, obviously, but what you had to say in there, I think, is important for the fire service at large, and I'm happy that you came on. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it myself. Published author. That's what I like. That's how we need to
add it to the resume, right?
Yeah, one time.
Hey, it only has to be once to be a professional, right? You get. Oh, I'm guessing you didn't get paid for it, but published.
Published, yeah.
So tell us about your journey in the fire service. I know you came on. You've been on for roughly 26 years. I know we were joking beforehand that you got to change the title of the article.
Yeah, that's actually one of the points of that article is every year I just kind of change it. 26-year Probie, the 27-year Probie, because the kind of the basis of the whole article was just kind of attacking everything I do in my career as I'm the new guy. I have to prove myself. I think it works for me. I know, even some of the feedback from the article, I got a lot of good feedback, but there was a lot of people who could relate to it. I do still feel like a new guy sometimes in certain things. Not as far as confidence of what I can do on the job, but just whether it's, a new promotion, a new firehouse, a new job title. I kind of attack each thing like with that mindset that I have to keep my mouth shut, prove myself before I can kind of start adding my own little things to it. But a lot of it is just natural. It comes natural for me. I just get, I get nervous when I'm doing something new, and I love.
Yeah, I think anybody that is, and I think anybody that's invested in being good at what they do and learning is going to feel that way. Sometimes, even if you, like you said, you might know your job, but it's something as simple as going into a new firehouse and now you have to learn new personalities. You have to learn new routines, like different things. Like it's also kind of part of, like, for me, is that like imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? Where you might know the information and then suddenly you're asked to like present it or whatever, and you're like, oh, feel like a little bit of imposter. I think most people who are invested in being good and really knowing what they do and being passionate about whatever it is, have that kind of mindset.
You as an instructor kind of know. I mean, you put yourself out there in front of students, you're going to get judged. I've always felt pretty confident in my skill level, only because, as you probably know and you probably attest to, that you got to be a constant student, so before you can teach, obviously you have to know the craft, the skill. I don't teach anything I'm not passionate about. That's something that's a steadfast rule with me. I could teach a bunch of different stuff on my job. I get asked to a lot, different things, and there's a lot of things I just kind of shy away from because that's not my specialty, and more importantly, it's not my passion. There's a few things I'm definitely passionate about, and I stick to those.
Right. So take me back to when you got hired in '98. Did you come on and have that Probie mindset like drilled into you, or did you bring that with you from somewhere else?
Well, yep. So I got on in April '98. Yeah. I didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a firefighter. It wasn't something I was dreaming of as a kid. I didn't chase fire trucks like like your buddy that we know, our mutual friend. So no, I was in the military. I joined the Navy. I did 4 years in the Navy, and even the Navy itself, growing up, that wasn't something I wanted to do either. I did try college for a little bit. Went to school down in Florida and really wasn't feeling it. My dad was a Marine. My dad served in Vietnam. So I did have, inklings that if I didn't last in college, that I would probably join the service. But I kind of kept those feelings to myself. And when it came time to joining, I, on a whim, just joined the Navy. And I considered myself a terrible swimmer at the time. And I said to myself, well, they're going to make me learn how to swim. They're going to force me to swim. So I even put myself in a situation then, like an uncomfortable situation on purpose, like knowing that might make it better for me. Even though I really didn't care about joining the Navy, I would have joined, at that point, I would have joined any of the armed services. But just through kind of a whim, I said, you know what, I'll try the Navy. And I always joke, if I went into that office that day and the circus was in that office, I probably would have joined the circus. I was just at a different place in my life. I just didn't want to, I had every intention to join the Marine Corps, and those guys just happened to be at lunch. And so that's God's honest truth. I was looking at some flyers on this little kind of spinning thing with all kinds of information about the Marine Corps, and I hear a knock on the door behind me, and I turn around, and it's a fella in a Navy outfit, and he's like, can I help you? And I said, I'm just trying to get some information on the Marine Corps. And he said, well, those guys are at lunch. 20 minutes later, I joined the Navy.
So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Those recruiters were celebrating afterwards too.
Look at this idiot I just got. Yeah. So
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one question real quick. Where'd you go to school in Florida?
I went to a small college called Flagler College. It was in St. Augustine, Florida.
Okay. I'm originally from Northern Florida. So
okay.
I always like to hear where people spent their time. I'm a transplant up to this area.
Okay.
Originally from my dad was Air Force, and so he spent the majority of my childhood in Northern Florida there. But the other thing I think is really important, we'll get back to your background, but saying that you intentionally put yourself in a hard situation, that's that's something in the fire service and in any job that is hard to do, mentally, and is something that's really important to do. So we talk about all the time, training. People like to train on things they're good at because it makes them feel good about themselves afterwards. It's hard to get people to train on the stuff that they're really bad at or poor performers at because they don't want to look bad. And I think having the mentality of hey, I'm not good at this, I'm going to intentionally put myself in this situation is a really good mentality to have.
I absolutely have followed that throughout my career. The only regret I might have had in my career is that I didn't do that at a certain point as a firefighter. I definitely grew as an officer and definitely tried a lot of different things, but I was in a little bit of my own little space. My first 9 years on the job, I kind of did what was comfortable, and I loved my firehouse, loved my group. And then it wasn't until a certain point in my life where I started to talk about having kids and priorities change, and at that point I said, okay, it's time to start studying, and then everything kind of changed into a different level the second half of my career.
And I think that's okay too. I've talked to a lot of people. I've also listened to a lot of podcasts. Everybody ebbs and flows in their personal life, in their professional life, in their career. It's a really rare thing that somebody can be on 100% of the time through their entire career. And I think that the important thing is acknowledging that and knowing if you can know when it's happening and pull yourself out, that's great. Also, if you can know when it did happen and be able to reflect on it, be okay, hey, this was going on. I wasn't doing, a super great job. Let's be better. That's important too.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I always joke about how I ended up in the Navy. I don't regret I don't have any regrets at all. There's certain things I wish I might have tried or did a little bit different, but overall, I was happy with that decision. But I think that set the foundation of kind of, not that I didn't have like grounding and a foundation of like a strong background from a great family life. I had all that. I was growing up in the city. I was, I made the right choices, when other kids weren't. I take pride in that. It was very easy to do the wrong thing. And I had a lot of, close people to me, not make the same decisions, and things have changed. Things have worked out differently for a lot of those folks. But I was a big, I call myself a club kid, the Boys and Girls Club in Boston. They were like my second home. When I wasn't at school or with the family, I was at the Boys and Girls Club. And that carried me from when I was 6 years old till I was 16 years old, right?
Hey guys, just here to ask you to head over to patreon.com/JobTlks. That's patreon.com/JobTlks and take a look at our page. We decided to start a Patreon account to help fund producing the podcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can join as one of our subscribers and help support us through the endeavor. We look forward to being around for the long haul, bringing on good guests, putting on good shows, and putting out good training. So we ask you to head over, consider joining our subscription, and help us out. Thanks so much.
And my first job was at the Boys Club. So yeah, I had a foundation was set by a lot of good people around me growing up. And I love.
Funny. I feel a lot of similarities in your story. Like I was very similar. Like I grew up in a good family, reasonable structure, but I also wasn't like destined for college. And I knew I was joining the military from when I was, probably 6, 7 years old. I knew I wanted to go in, and there was something about that like structure and lifestyle that I craved that wasn't a result of some like bad thing in my life that, came before it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I didn't hit rock bottom, and that's great. Like I had a great foundation, and I'm not going to act like I had a tough life growing up. I didn't. My family was awesome. I grew up in a great neighborhood. It was, I don't regret it at all. But that's one of the reasons I applied to a school in Florida. I wanted to do something different, go somewhere different. So me and my buddy, when we joined that college, we had never even visited the school. We just joined it because it was a reasonably priced college in Florida. We did no research. So yeah. But we
awesome.
That's kind of how I've attacked a lot of things in my life. I've tried things on a whim, and sometimes they worked out, sometimes they didn't. But at least I tried. But
yeah, absolutely. So you got on in April of '98, and you got assigned directly to a truck?
I did. I ended up getting out of the service in 19. I took the exam when I was home on break one time, just on a whim. I had an uncle on the job. He was actually the deputy chief of training at the time. And he said, Kenny, have you ever thought about taking the fire exam? I had about 3 years in the Navy at this point out of my 4 years. And I said, no, I hadn't. I was like, I had aspirations to go back to school and I wanted to be in the FBI, but none of that was still like, felt like a dream to me. So I did take that exam on a whim, and then my score was what it was. And I sat on the list, but as soon as I got out, it kind of like, I turned my paperwork in and I kind of shot up the list. So I didn't have much time as a civilian in between the military and the fire. I got on pretty quick. So, and I was assigned right away out of the academy to a truck. I was.
Where'd you go?
I went to Ladder 15 in the Back Bay on Boylston Street, right on the Marathon route near Fenway Park.
I mean, everybody, at least up here, everybody's familiar with it from the line of duty deaths several years ago.
So at the time, my uncle being in training, he couldn't help me get on the job, but he always said, hey, when you get on the job, I'll make sure you go somewhere good. And I didn't know where anywhere good was. I had like I said, I didn't know where all the firehouses were that people wanted to work at. So when I got Ladder 15 out of the academy, I was pleasantly surprised, as I knew that firehouse just from hanging out in the city, and the area around there is kind of popular and touristy, and it was a great spot to go right out of the academy. Kind of do a little bit of everything, and from high rises to brownstones to elevator calls. We had a couple throughways like the tollway and some pretty busy highways within striking distance. So it was a great place to go, and I spent almost 9 years there before I started to think about trying something else.
That's great. And then, so when you moved away from there, were you still as a firefighter, or did you promote out of there?
I did not promote out of there. I had a mentor who I looked up to. He'd actually be a great guest for your podcast. Sandy Lassa. He at the time was a lieutenant on Ladder 15. He had since throughout his career, went to Rescue 1 and Rescue 2. He's an instructor, kind of known nationally, but he was never my boss. But I worked on him. I worked in the same house as him, and we kind of became close after 9/11 with trips to New York City for the funerals. It was either him or I organizing those Firehouse trips to the funerals. Because at that point, after 9/11, we were probably going every other week for 2 to 3 days at a time. And then those 2 to 3 days, we'd hit 2 or 3 funerals in those 2 or 3 days. And that went on for a year because the funerals would it'd be, initially there was a bunch of funerals and then it would just be scattered throughout the year. It was a very unique time, but some of the bonds that, we made at Engine 33 and Ladder 15 were incredible during that time, just because of our trips to New York City for the funerals.
Right.
So, yeah.
Wow.
I had a good mentor.
Where did you go?
Yeah, he ended up going to Rescue 1, Sandy.
Yep.
And at some point, I thought it was time for me to try something different. And so that's when I put in for Rescue 1 and did the heavy rescue downtown. So I ended up working there for 3 years. I liked it. I loved a lot of the guys there. But it just didn't feel the same to me as it did in Boylston Street. My original fire.
Right.
I tried it. I couldn't fake. I couldn't act like I was into the ropes and the shoring and the trench. I love going to more fires, but I didn't really like the technical side as much as I thought I would. And again, like we talked about, I can't fake it. If I'm either into it, I'm not. So,
yeah. I think that's like, not only is it okay, I think it's important if you have the ability to go somewhere where you are passionate, your talent is going to be better. You know what I mean? Like if you're somewhere and you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're even if you want to, you're not going to be able to do as good of a job, I don't think. And if you have the ability, like a department like Boston, you have the ability to go somewhere else that you can put your talents and passion together. I think that's huge.
And it's huge, like you said, to go somewhere else and try something different. It's all based on, probably the same with you in most departments. It's time and rank. So, I couldn't even think about the rescue or either rescue until I had a certain time on the job anyway. So it's right around the 10-year mark. It's a little different now. It might be a little bit easier to get those companies. But at the time, 10 years was a nice number to start. Like, you can kind of go to some places that were a little bit more difficult to get. Yeah, I don't regret it. Again, I made some good friendships there that I still have to this day. And, I got to go to some more a lot more fires than initially, but that training that went along with it, there's the people who work in tech rescue companies, honestly, the amount of training that they do that they don't get credit for, that people don't understand how much training they do. It's an incredible amount of training. And, I applaud them. I mean, I tried it. I was into some of the subjects, but not all of them. And,
right.
A lot of people just don't understand how much training goes into those companies.
Right. And like you said, I think you have to be passionate about it to want to do that extra stuff. I mean, I think if you talk to anybody who's into tech rescue, they're not generally just a little bit into it.
Yeah, they're weird,
full-blown nerds. You know what I mean?
They're a little strange too.
Yeah, I resemble that remark. But like you said, I think it's good. Like trying something new and then realizing, hey, this isn't for me. My talents are better used elsewhere is important. And not everybody has the luxury in their department, especially when you start talking about smaller departments. Not everybody has the luxury to do that. But when you do, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah, there's some, and I bounced around. Like I said, I went from Ladder 15 to Rescue 1, made my way back to Ladder 15 eventually. And then as an officer, I bounced around a little bit. It's like there are some people in my job and probably yours that will go to one company and that's where they want to be their whole career. I have a tendency, especially the second half of my career, where I can't sit still. I need to be put in different. I need that uncomfortable, like kind of what I talked about in the article. It's like I don't know if it's I think it's a personal thing for me. Like I just need that constant change, and as I start to get comfortable, I start thinking about what's next.
Yep. Again, a lot of similarities here in personality. That's definitely the same for me. And I think the nice thing about the fire service is that you can explore all these different things and stay in the fire service. You know what I mean? Like, I think having that personality, if you were stuck in a job and then you're like, this is too comfortable and you start bouncing around, would be a dangerous thing. But having the fire service where you can be like, I want to, try and be a truckie. I want to try and be an engine guy. I want to promote and be a boss. I want to do tech rescue, whatever the case is. There's a lot of paths that you can take. And then And then outside of that, you start teaching and doing stuff outside of the department. Like it's just a good career for people who enjoy being a little bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So that kind of path that led me back to Ladder 15 and where I was comfortable, it also kind of coincided with my children. My youngest at the time was just a baby, and my oldest might have been 3 or 4 at the time. And I said, okay, it's time to get serious. It's time to not just be about what's most comfortable for me. Being back
Right.
at Boylston Street where I was really comfortable. It was time to study, put myself out there again. Like time to grow up. That's how I kind of framed it for my mind. I made the commitment to study, and I put 1 year of studying in. Like most, city departments, you're given a stack of books that you have to read, and they're going to ask 80 questions out of, a pile of books that's 4 feet high. So,
Right.
the known thing on our job, and probably the same with you, is if you put the time in, if you actually put the time in, you can kind of guarantee yourself a good score. So, the kind of
Right.
unspoken word on our job is if you put 1,000 hours of studying in, you probably get more than likely going to get a 90 or above, and that's what you need to get promoted. So
Right.
once I made that decision, it was like my second job was studying. I did that, 3 to 4 hours a day for a year, and my wife was incredibly understanding with that. Like, let me get my time in studying because this job has benefited us in so many ways, and where my wife has been able to stay home with the kids, and that was part of our plan when we had children was the flexibility of my job and being home with the kids when I needed to, swapping. But then when it came time to get serious, I could set aside all that time to study. So yeah, when I did get promoted, I did get that 90. I got like a 93 or something, but it's only because I put the time in. It wasn't because I was the smartest guy. It was just you put the time in, you're gonna get a good score, and I did. And
Right.
that hit right around. I got promoted right at the 16-year mark. The whole process is like 2 years long. A year of studying, you take the exam. It takes another year to get actually promoted. So yeah, started at the 14th year, but I promoted in the 16th year. So I felt very confident in my skill level at that time, in time of the job to be, to feel pretty good about being a lieutenant.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. People get promoted for all different reasons, right? People that want to just have the paycheck, people that want the status, people that want a little bit of both, but are also passionate, people that think they can be good leaders, whatever the case is. But you see people promote sometimes way too quick, and not even like years wise, right? Like you could have somebody that was on the job for 5 or 6 years and just happened to catch a ton of work and like get a ton of opportunity and potential, and like they could be ready. But I think knowing like, hey, I feel like there's a point where being uncomfortable is like a personal thing. Like you shouldn't be uncomfortable necessarily to be able to do the job. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep. And
Like if I'm gonna be an officer and put myself in a position where I'm responsible for people in their lives, like that's not necessarily a situation where I should just go into it completely uncomfortable and let it pan out how it pans out.
Trust me, I understand. I mean, I'll get more into it in a little bit about officer training and officer development, like how important that is. But we didn't have a lot of that in the beginning. But I don't fault guys with 3 years on the job studying, not at all. Especially if you have gotten to know that person. Like we have a lot of guys with, and that's probably the same with you. There's a lot of people in the fire service with 3 years on the job that may have been a Army officer or a Marine Corps officer or what had some kind of own their own business. They have some sort of background that they might not just be that 22-year-old kid who's got no experience and worked at a slow house and got promoted. We have those too, and there's nothing wrong with that either, as long as they're willing to learn and they're not doing it for the wrong reasons. I have absolutely 100% met guys that have done it for the wrong reasons.
Right.
We have 1,600 firefighters. They're not all perfect.
Right. And I think that's a really good point that you made, because you can have people that are really good at being firemen or firefighters, and you can have people that are really good at being leaders. So you can promote and become the leader and rely on those people that you work with too. You know what I mean? Like if you're not, if if you're not maybe the best firefighter, but you're a good leader and you're willing to learn, then and you have good guys under you, then you can be really effective at your job too.
Absolutely. Yep. So I think it's, I mean, everybody's a little different. And me deciding to study was also right around the time, right when just before I started to study, it was the first time I got involved in training, right around the, I don't know, maybe it might have been like the 10-year mark. It was right around the time I was on the rescue company. We had just introduced RIT training to our department. This was like 07. I do know it's 07 we did have a line of duty. We had a double line of duty death in 07, and RIT training was going on at the time when we had that double line of duty.
Was that the restaurant?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. Because I know we had just started training the whole job at that point. And it was, at that point, training in our job in 07 was almost non-existent. And then we introduced RIT training because of guys like Sandy Lassa, who went outside the job, brought it back. And I was lucky enough to be part of his initial cadre to roll it out. And that was my first kind of introduction to training at all. And it was doing something I loved. I was already been a student of that subject, which had been around other departments for many years, but for Boston in 07, that's when I never even heard of RIT training before, or RIT teams. It wasn't something we had in Boston. So I dove headfirst into that and had been obsessed with it. And that kind of just, that training was my foundation. Then as I got promoted, it all kind of coincided with another double line of duty death we had on Beacon Street, which was, two members from the Firehouse where I was appointed to. So that took it to a different level for me, because just knowing one of the guys very well is one of my best friends on the job. We worked together for 5 years in the same group. So Eddie Walsh, the lieutenant who passed away that day, was actually a firefighter on ladder 15 with me. I was actually his senior man, even though he was older than me. He was he got on the job a little late. He was part of like a lawsuit class where guys who had gotten perfect scores that weren't veterans that had gotten passed over for many years, and they finally got their job. So he was part of a small group of people with perfect scores that had been passed over, and he finally got on with and he was appointed to ladder 15 on my group. So he had been there for a few years before he decided to study, which was before me. And he got promoted and bounced around a little bit, and then finally got back to the house where he was comfortable. He didn't make it back to ladder 15. He made it across the floor at engine 33, and that was his first spot. So yeah, he'd been there
Eddie
a month.
Walsh was detailed over to the engine that day, right?
No, not that was the other fellow, Mike Kennedy.
Oh, sorry, Mike Kennedy. I'm sorry, Mike Kennedy was detailed over to the engine
kind of paint that picture. Eddie was on engine 33 for a month at that point as the boss. Mike Kennedy was detailed over that day from ladder 15, as was another firefighter from ladder 15. So in essence, that day they kind of had 3 truckies on the engine. None of that really played into what happened. They could have had 7 engine guys in the engine that day. It didn't matter that it was a truck or engine guy. It was just, a perfect storm of terrible shit is usually what, just a perfect storm of shit. So, but unfortunately, after his passing, Mike Kennedy, I didn't know as well. I knew him just from training, but he had kind of jumped into that house when I had left. So we really never worked together. Because at that point I was kind of floating around the city. I was number 1 on the list to get promoted. So, the kind of thing that I'll never forget is when Eddie passed, that was my job. So I got promoted when Eddie died. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I always say, like, when I teach, I don't take that lightly. And, that kind of framed the second half of my career. Kind of took my passion for that type of training to another level. That's when I started going across the country to take any class I could. And then eventually, started teaching that subject, fireground survival and firefighter rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that really makes you want to do the position justice.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, it's unfortunate that it was like a 1-for-1 when he passed, I got promoted, but whether he retired or he had got promoted or unfortunately the day he passed, like sometimes I'm glad if it was anybody, it was me or somebody he would have known, that got promoted, because he had a lot of buddies, we had a lot of buddies that all decided to study at the same time, and we were all kind of one after another on the list. So yeah, it was just a strange time.
Yeah. Wow.
Also, it also coincided with a huge change in our job. We had a new commissioner soon after that, a new mayor. And I was just happened to be in the right place at the right time as far as being a new lieutenant when a lot of changes were being implemented from apparatus to SCBA to an investment in training. I kind of rode that wave with a bunch of other new lieutenants at the time.
So did that help get you more involved with training within the department and getting the department more training in general?
Oh, absolutely. Because I think, like I said, back in 07, when we introduced RIT training, there was not as much mandatory training. It was just more like on the job. The training academy was different. It was like just basically mostly used for the recruits and some live fire training here and there for us, but not like it was after Beacon Street. After Beacon Street in 2014, training was like another level.
It's unfortunate that sometimes we're reactionary in that way, but it's also good that we do some justice to the deaths and actually have a positive outcome after it.
Oh, absolutely. We had well, there are a couple of things that used to bug me, but we'd have the whole department went through after Beacon Street. The whole department went through like a basement fire training, where they live fire basement training, but no one ever said it was because of Beacon Street, which I always got. I always thought, like, I always say this to anybody who listen, like, we should have named drills after Mike and Eddie. We should have, like, we honor them by getting better, and not saying that
absolutely
that we did that day was because that's why they died, but just trying to like just dedicate, not forget. We had a huge, I'm not sure if you've ever been to Boston Fire Academy, but we have a huge 3-story flow path simulator that was the first of its kind, that was built by a grant because of what happened on Beacon Street. And I always say to guys, Mike and Eddie's name should be on this building. Like, we wouldn't have had this building if it wasn't for them. So when the guys piss and moan about training, I'll just point to this building. Hey, this is why we're here today. All right. Kind of sets the tone and kind of reframes it.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I mean, there are a lot of drills out there that are named after firefighters who died in the line of duty. And like you said, it's not necessarily saying like, oh, like we failed them, but you're saying like, if this situation happens again, we're going to be better prepared so that it doesn't happen to somebody else. And that's the best thing you can do to somebody's legacy.
And it's amazing. I guarantee it's the same in your department and anybody listening. The amount of people that we've put on since that double line of duty death on Beacon Street. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of that. We've probably put on 600 to 700 firefighters minimum since that double line of duty death. So I was kind of framed it like, we have 3/4 of our job, because if you subtract headquarters positions, training positions, we probably have we have 1,600 firefighters, but we probably have 1,100 in the field. And now we have probably 600 to 700 new guys since in the last 10 years. So 3/4 of our people who work in the field have no connection to that double line of duty death. And that just blows my mind how much we've changed.
In 10 years. That's only a third of a career.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's, I think that's a national, thing, the amount of turnover in the last 10 years. But, I know after 9/11, New York City went through a huge turnover. Most of their department has no connection to 9/11 now.
Right.
So, it changes so fast.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That's 23 years ago this year. Will be 23 years ago.
And the retirement system is different,
Right. Yeah, it's great. I think it's a similar, so I was in high school for 9/11, but it's that similar feeling when that first high school class that weren't alive for it. You know what I mean? And it's just like a different, it's weird. It's just like, it feels like a different era has passed, a different time in the country in general. I'm sure in the department too,
It was so different. When I came on in 98, it was such an older department. It was just so different, so different. Because, like the World War II guys and then the Vietnam guys, now it's the, the post 9/11 guys, like these big, huge turnovers every 25 years.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a big turnover in my department soon as well. I think we were looking, there's a couple of huge classes that equate somewhere close to like a fifth or a quarter of our department that are eligible to retire, all eligible to retire in the next like 5 years.
It's amazing. I have that in my sights now. I have my retirement in my sights. I can go in 5 years.
Right.
I actually, I've had talks with the wife, and right now, I love being at the Firehouse, but I do have some goals, and if it all works out, I probably will be gone in 6 years. I won't be gone from the fire service. My goal is to, maybe go somewhere else and training captain position, some sort of teaching position, just kind of
That'd be cool.
Yeah. My two girls are, my daughter's birthday is today, my youngest, and then my oldest is 20. So I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old. So just going to follow them around in 5 years.
I appreciate you spending your kid's birthday with me
she's
here.
In school.
That's great. So kind of backtracking a little bit, when you got promoted, you went to an engine company.
So initially, my first company was Ladder 24 down in Beacon Hill area of Boston near the State House. Downtown, busy, they respond to like where the Celtics and Bruins play. Like, that's Boston Gardeners there. That arena is in their little area. So it's a lot of like bars and nightclubs and, a lot of touristy areas. Not many fires. They run a lot though. But there's certain places as a new boss that you're going to end up more than likely, and that's one of them. But the nice thing about that place was they got a huge influx of new guys, like 6 at a time from a class. Like they might get 10 new guys in 1 year to that Firehouse. So being there for 2 years, it was great. Like I liked working with the young guys. A lot of those guys have now since moved on and got promoted. Some of them are at the Firehouse I'm at now. But there's a lot of benefits to being in a house where new guys are sent, and that's I loved being there for those couple of years. But I wasn't.
I feel like when you have a house that has new guys, you're more. I don't want to say you're more obligated, because you should be kind of obligated to training anyway, but you're more obligated to those people and getting out and doing stuff all the time.
Yep, and being busy. Like I said, maybe not necessarily fire duty wise, but elevator calls at least once a day. Some sort of forcible entry, obviously your medical stuff, but some good car accidents. So you got a little bit of everything, but also like all these guys are the same age. So everybody's, going, the outings, the golf outings, the vacations together. It was pretty good bonding. And it was, again, a lot of those guys I'm still friends with to this day. Pretty easy too.
When did you? No, go ahead.
What I was saying is having a new guys as a new lieutenant. It's like the easy. That's it's like having a recruit again. It's like they just like a sponge. You know, you're not walking into a group that has 3 guys with 25 years in the job. You're walking into guys you probably had at the academy as an academy instructor, which I did. That was I don't regret that at all. It was the best thing I ever did, and I tell new lieutenants this. One of the best things you could do as a new lieutenant is volunteer to be an academy instructor. I feel like you relearn the job, kind of get the foundational skills down. It's just going to make you a lot more confident as a lieutenant to be able to help with a lot of different things and kind of relearn the job.
Do you guys get detailed over to like training if you're an academy instructor, or do you stay on company and just do it on overtime?
I don't think that's ever been an issue. Maybe back in the day when there's so many people who want to be an academy instructor now, because it's a good place to kind of ride out your early time. Because when you first get promoted, you're not going to get a house. Some people don't like the bouncing around. Some people like the stability. And so there's enough good people, putting their name in the hat for that. That's not usually an issue to force somebody to be there.
That's good. We just started running our own academy again. They had run it for a long time, up until I think the 80s. And then last year was the first year that we ran it again. And we're getting ready to have another class starting up soon.
Awesome.
And it's good because you get, like you said, you get re-engaged, you get re-involved, you start learning again. It's really doing our academy last year is what made me decide to apply for the state academy to teach.
Nice.
That's great. I think it's just, like you said, it's just one of those things like you're continuously exposed. And so you're continuously learning and improving and getting better. And then, again, it's like putting yourself in that uncomfortable position where you have to kind of perform.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And like I said, you don't have to be an instructor for life just because you did a class down the academy. It's just a way as a new boss. I just think it's a good way to learn a lot of different things and that you may have forgotten, and kind of and you're also going to meet guys that more than likely you're going to end up working with. That's what I liked about it.
Right. And I think that was one of the nice things about doing our academy is all the people we had. It was a split, so we had Brookline was part of ours too. But for the most part, it was all people that you're going to work with. So you're not that your investment is any less when you're teaching for like a state academy, but when you're teaching for people are coming into your firehouse, you start building those relationships right away. You know what I mean? Like you start building the relationships, you start feeling people out, getting to know what makes people tick, how they perform, different things, and I think that's a good thing. Big positive to having your own academy.
So if that, one of the other things I do like about training, not so much with the recruits though, is, I'm still involved a lot in different things that we do in our job, but I've gotten to meet almost every single person in the field. And if I had just stayed at a firehouse in my own little corner, that's not the case. Even though we're kind of a small job, 1,600 sounds huge, but over a course of a training cycle, you're going to meet everybody. And I always like that part of the training too, getting to kind of know everybody and seeing how different companies operate. And, someday you may work at that company. I always kind of kept a mental note of certain guys in training that I would like to work with. Yep. That's part of the reason why I bounce around a lot. I meet guys in training like, I'd like to work over there someday. I'd like to work with that guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when did you test and become captain?
Captain, I decided. So I finally got to as a lieutenant, I was kind of bouncing around, like I said. I went from Cambridge Street on ladder 24. Then I went home, which I thought was going to feel like home, to Boylston Street on engine 33. But I just kind of felt the firehouse had changed a lot since the time, not only when I was there, but also after Mike and Eddie passed. There was a lot of turnover. It was a different place. There was still a lot of great guys there, but it just felt different to me. And didn't feel like the same place that I had been for most of my career at that point. So I had put in for a couple busy fire duty companies in Division 2, which is like the more neighborhood side of the city, because that's where I didn't do much different. That's where I don't want to say regrets, but that's the one thing I didn't do in the first half of my career was try the neighborhoods. We call it Division 2. Like, they do get more fires over there. They do a lot less of the other stuff. I always liked downtown just because it was busy all the time. Right. But the fire duty was on the other side of the city. So I put in for a couple different engines. I didn't get them. I was in the running right up to the last day. So at this point, I had 3 or 4 years as a lieutenant. And I started to think, well, maybe I'll just study for captain, And it was at that point I decided to study that I got a call from a friend who was going to be put in for a captain spot of engine 21. And he said the lieutenant spot at engine 21 is going to be opening. He's like, how about we both go there together? And I'm like, I'm not going to get it. I'd been beaten out for these same kind of companies already over and over again. And I kind of reserved myself that I wasn't going to get it. And when I ended up getting it, I ended up spending 3 years there at engine 21. And that honestly was some of my favorite times on the job. It was a single engine house that had great fire duty. It had great, very, very close-knit crew there on all groups. It was one of those places you kind of like just didn't put in for. It was one of those places you either asked to put in for, or you reached out ahead of time and not got permission, but you don't have to get permission to go anywhere. If you have the time, you get the time. But I did. I still did. I reached out to the senior man on a certain group, and I said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about coming over. Don't want to step on any toes if you guys had somebody else in mind. And I thought by reaching out to the senior man, that might be the way to go, regardless if the captain wanted me there or not. It ended up paying dividends. The guys were awesome. I met a lot of guys I didn't know because I never worked in that side of the city. And I had a lot of fun there. It actually kind of was sad to get promoted because I was very happy at Engine 21.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing when when the moving on is bittersweet, Oh
yeah. Yeah, like with lieutenant, I was ready. I was absolutely ready to be a lieutenant. With captain, it was, because it's kind of the same job and it's kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but, you're still the boss of your crew. Yes, as a captain, you have the whole house to worry about. But in the end, in your typical working day, it's just you and your crew. So I had to start over again. So, yeah. So that was during COVID. So it was a little odd. I got sent to headquarters during COVID. I was in the Safety, Health, and Wellness Division as a captain initially. And
fun.
Again, in that 7 months I was at headquarters, I made a lot of great relationships with people I didn't know before, the payroll people, the IT people, like things like
Right.
areas of the job that I've used because of my relationships that I built in that 7 months. That now as a captain, I
Right.
can just pick up the phone and call so and so at IT, so and so at payroll, so and so, because I built relationships in that 7 months at headquarters that I never thought I would
Right.
want. So,
Well, and I think that's a good transition into talking about this article you wrote. So one of the things you just said is that you started over again.
yep,
And kind of one of the ideas in the article you wrote is that the main idea obviously is that you have the mindset of a probie. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. And sometimes that's starting over, you become the probie again. So like you said, now I'm a captain. I was a lieutenant, now I'm a captain. I have to now learn this job all over again. I might not be year one probie, I might be year 25, but I'm still a probie because I'm a new captain and
yep.
I'm learning this new role in this new environment. I'm not in a house. What at what point did you really start thinking about that mindset and wanting to like put that down and on paper?
So my initial thought was, well, because it's for me, it's real. Like I said in the beginning, like that feeling of putting myself in uncomfortable situations. It's something that, especially in the first half of my career, was easy because I was assigned to Ladder 15. I spent 9 years there. I was the good guy on the good, same group, worked with a lot of the same guys. Like, so, I was comfortable there, but I still took the job serious. But then once I made that mental commitment to try something different, whether it was my first commitment was studying. Like, I had never really studied like that. Even in high school, I was like one of those kids who got B's and everything without really trying. I was a B student my whole career. Like my whole life was like just, yeah, he's fine. Nothing, I didn't put the time in. I wasn't a slacker, but I didn't put the time in. It was that first decision to study that I thought I grew up a little bit, where I made a commitment, I set a goal, I did it, it paid off. So I saw the results of that setting goals, and then bouncing around as a lieutenant from academies, firehouses, captain as a headquarters to another firehouse, all the time starting over, all the time proving myself. And in the meantime, I'm taking classes as a student where I would always try to put myself in these situations. If there was a fireground survival course somewhere in the country, I was taking it. And, I didn't know anybody a lot of times in these classes. I didn't, I just put my head down. I was trying to be like right beside, whatever student I was with, I'd partner up for the day or the week. I went down to North Carolina and I put myself through the North Carolina breathing school, which is not like a smoke diver,
Oh, wow.
but it's a 5-day, 50-hour, very intense survival school, all based around line of duty cadets and near misses. It is the best class I've ever taken in my life, but I didn't have to.
What's the name of it again?
The North Carolina Breathing Equipment School, sometimes known as the Breathing School. It's out of outside Charlotte. It's at Gastonia Community College. If you Google it, you'll find it. They offer like 2 or 3 a year, and they always sell out. It's a requirement for certain departments in North Carolina, but people reach out all the time and go through it. So, yeah, I would highly recommend it. They usually start off with like 50 students, and they might end up with, they'll lose a few throughout the week. But I only took that class because I had taken another class, and just through networking with guys with similar interests, like that's how I ended up. I never heard of it before, just like you just wrote it down right now. That's how all these things happen. Like guys are into it, certain subjects, like like you'll probably Google it later, and it might pique your interest. But anyway, trying something different all the time.
Yeah, we've talked about that before too on the show. Is like once you start, like it took a long time to even know that so many of these opportunities existed. I think you have to be around the right people in your career that can open those doors to you, or you have to know to even look for them, because you don't know what you don't know.
Oh yeah.
And then once you start looking into, here's a program. Oh, there's a conference. Oh, here's another conference. Here's this. Here are these people. Like it really, one door just leads to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next.
And that's where, honestly, I'm not like, I'm on social media. I like it, but 90% of what I do is just following different things I'm interested in, whether it's fire related, health related, leadership related. or like funny dog videos and funny baby videos. That's about it.
Also important.
Yes. That's pretty much all I do. That's what it's for. But there's a lot of people I know who are great firefighters who aren't on social media, could care less about traveling outside their department, and they're awesome firefighters. Doesn't mean they're just not into the job. I'm not like I said, I didn't follow fire trucks and chase them when I was a kid. I'm not a spark or a buff. But if I am doing something, I'm going to be into it. Like I said.
And that's important too. Like, it doesn't matter. I used to have this conversation. Like, I'm sure that you've heard of being in the military too. People would be like, oh, these guys just joined the military to get the college money or to get the sign-on bonus or whatever. And it's like, okay, so like, good for them. They actually want to work for those things. It doesn't really matter why you found yourself in the fire service, but now that you're here, you just have to be good at it.
Exactly. Like I said, I'm here now. I'm not going to waste my time. I say this now when I teach. I'm lucky enough to teach all over the country. I travel a ton. So I travel probably 6 to 10 times a year minimum, sometimes more. If I'm away from my family, I have to be doing something I love. I don't want to waste any more time.
And so you teach now with the Fire Department Training Network. You do new officer training for your own department. You've recently joined with O2X. Am I missing anything else?
The IFF is one of the bigger ones. The
Fireground Survival through IFF. Yeah.
FDTN. I'm lucky enough to help out twice a year with their live fire RIT camp. That's twice a year. I've been doing that, I think 6 or 7 years now, twice a year. So I'd like to do more, but that's an honor to be even allowed to teach there. So I don't take that lightly. I'm actually missing my first camp. It's every April and October. This April, it falls on the Boston Marathon. That's another thing that I'm put my name in. I don't know. I put my name out there to do it, and I'm doing it now. So that's.
Are you raising money for it?
I am. I'm actually raising for the Ed Walsh Foundation.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's a 10-year anniversary coming up of his death, as Mike and Eddie. But I'm going to run for the Ed Walsh Foundation.
I'll grab the link from you when we're done. I'll put it in the video description so anybody who's listening that feels compelled to donate to the cause can do so.
The feedback, I just put it out on social media the other day that I was running, and we have a goal to raise $5,000 each runner. I think I'm at 4,400 in like 3 days.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I did not. I was so nervous putting it out there that I just asking for donations. There's so many people running for so many great causes. That's what I kind of said. I get it. And it's just after the holidays, but I don't take it lightly. The people who have donated or shared that, I'm so grateful.
Right.
And when I first made the commitment to run this marathon, and I'm not a runner, it was all coincided with, I turned 50. I lost my dad this past year, and kind of just.
Sorry to hear that.
No, thank you. But I was just kind of like at a low point, like health-wise. I've been, I took a month off from work right before he passed and sat beside him with my sister and my mother and my family coming and going. But my sister and my mother were constant for a whole month with me, and that month was awesome to have with him. But have a couple IPAs every night, some takeout every night. At the end of that month and after the funeral services, I probably had put on a few pounds, and I'm a thin guy. So, but for me, that felt awful. And then I had a physical right around the same time, and I happened to work the Boston Marathon on an overtime last year.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching all these people run, a lot of firefighters running, and just feeling sorry for myself. And I'm like, I'm running this next year. And then the next day, I said, I started mile 1 the next day and struggled with mile 1, and now I'm running half marathons, and I'm going to be ready.
Man, good for you. That's awesome. That's I will say that's one of those uncomfortable positions I don't really care to put myself in.
Oh yeah. It's honestly, it's just I kind of associated with studying. When you make that commitment to study, it's the same thing. You just got to get your hours in. You just got to get your time on your feet in. I do enjoy it now, and I'm telling you right now, I hated running, hated it. But now I don't waste that time either. I'm listening to podcasts, I'm thinking, going through my day, because I'm grateful to be involved in all these things going on right now. But sometimes I just need some time to clear my head. And kind of go over what's coming up and what I need to do.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is all going to end for me. Like I said, I have a plan. In 5 or 6 years that I'm going to just strike while the iron's hot now and do as much as I can. But then there's going to be a time where it's going to shut off and just kind of slow down.
Yeah, I think having that plan is important too. Like understanding that, you may want to do this for your whole life till you're 100 years old, but our minds and bodies don't always hold up that long. So having an exit strategy that lets you do the thing, lets you still be involved the way you want to be involved and do the things that you want to do, is important. Because people that sneaks up on them and they have that injury and accidentally and their career's over and they're not, and rightfully so, not mentally prepared for it. Nobody's mentally prepared for that. Adds a lot to what's already going on. So having that plan is important.
Yeah, I think I'm hoping, knock on wood, it'll time out with when I decide to go. That, like I said, I might still be involved in teaching somewhere or training somewhere.
Yeah,
and I'm open to anything. I mean, I'll go to Oklahoma. I'll go to Nevada. I'll go anywhere, wherever my girls take us. Because I think they're going to end up. I have no idea what they end up. They're going to end up. One could end up in California. One could end up in Florida. So we'll pick a spot right in the middle, and I'll look for a job around there for a few years.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
We're rapidly approaching that hour. It's crazy how fast the time flies when you start talking, man.
I can't stop talking. Sorry, buddy. It's my fault.
No, listen, I say this every time. Like, I would sit here for 4 hours. I'm totally happy just sitting here and chatting for 4 hours. So the way we'll get around it is that we'll just have to have you back on to talk more.
Oh boy, I appreciate it, buddy.
I really appreciate you coming on, and there's a lot to digest for what you said. I think just the attitude of putting yourself in uncomfortable places to make yourself better, and to treat everything as a probie, to approach it as a probie, as a learning opportunity, is really important. It's important in the fire service, but it's important in life too. Every situation you have outside the firehouse can be a learning opportunity as well. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to kids and families and everything else. So it's a really amazing attitude to have and to be able to like walk through life with. And so I appreciate you coming on to talk to us about it. And for anybody who hasn't read the article, it's in Fire Engineering. I will put a link to it in the video description, as well as a link to your fundraiser for the marathon. So this episode we shoot ahead of time. It'll air in a few weeks, but it'll air well before the marathon. So we'll do that. And I appreciate you coming on. Is there anything that you'd want to wrap up on? Any words of wisdom? I feel like there's a lot of words.
Honestly, I know I've been yapping for quite a bit now. It's been almost an hour. I just want to understand, like, all these things that I've said, or I've wrote about, or I talk about, or when I teach. My number one thing is I just try to be myself. I'm a nice guy. Part of my being a boss, it's going to be really hard for me to be an asshole, to put it clearly. Like, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to treat you like, you want to be treated. Like, I try to be nice to everybody, and that's worked out for me. And I'm not phony, like it's
a golden rule, man.
They mean something.
Yeah. And real quick, not to go on another tangent, but again, we've talked about this, is like, especially firefighters, man, they can smell bullshit.
Oh yeah.
So if you come in and you're not real with them, and you're phony, and you say things and you don't mean them, and you try to act like you are one way and you're not, man, they smell that in 2 seconds, and you lose credibility, and it's really hard to get it back if you lose it.
I 100% agree. I'm just not phony. That's all. What you see is what you get.
It's good. That's good. There are a lot of people that don't subscribe to that. And again, not even necessarily in the firehouse or in the fire service, just in life in general. People try to put an image out of something they're not. And I think if you can put an image out of whatever you are, is better than being fake. And if that happens to be the kind of person that has a 26-year probie mindset, then even better, man. That's awesome.
Thanks, pal.
So thanks again for tuning in. Captain Hayes, I really appreciate you coming on. This was great. Don't forget to take a look at the links, read the article, make a donation if you have it in you to his fundraiser site for the marathon running, and we'll catch you guys again in 2.